Society has this collective agreement that weakness or instability or even just having trouble getting up from a chair is sort of this unavoidable tax we pay for getting older.
Right. We treat it almost like a law of physics.
Exactly. Like you turn 60 or 65 and suddenly your legs just don't really belong to you in the same way anymore. You just accept that stepping off a curb is going to require a little more calculation.
Yeah. Or that standing up from the sofa means you have to physically brace yourself.
Yeah, we've completely normalized this narrative of inevitable physical decline. But what if we've got it all wrong?
Well, we absolutely have, and we've normalized it largely because the decline happens in what I call a diagnostic blind spot.
A blind spot? What do you mean?
So if you look at standard medical practice, we are incredibly adept at diagnosing acute injuries, right? A fractured tibia shows up on an X-ray instantly.
Right.
A torn ligament shows up on an MRI. But progressive age-related muscle loss, it doesn't trigger any immediate alarms. I mean, there's no rash, no sudden fever, no acute pain.
It's just silent.
Exactly. Because of that silence, the medical establishment often dismisses those early warning signs as mere chronological aging.
And that brings us to the mission of today's deep dive. We are exploring the idea that losing your leg strength being, quote-unquote, just part of getting older is actually one of the most harmful falsehoods we've ever been taught.
It really is a limiting belief, and the clinical data proves it.
Right. So today, for everyone listening, we are unpacking the clinical findings and nutritional protocols championed by Dr. Alan Mandel. He points to this massive fundamental misunderstanding in how we treat our bodies early in the morning.
Yeah, his work argues that eating specific nutrient profiles before 8 o'clock in the morning can actually halt and even reverse age-related leg muscle deterioration.
Which is just, it's still blowing my mind. We're talking about potentially slowing the biological aging of your leg muscles by 10 years.
Or more, honestly.
Yeah.
And the fascinating part is that this isn't reliant on, experimental pharmaceuticals or complex surgeries.
No, it's entirely rooted in understanding human biochemistry. Specifically, the state your body is in the exact moment you wake up.
Right, because breakfast can act as a literal shield against aging.
I love that. We always hear about calcium for bones or puzzles for your brain, but rebuilding leg strength at the breakfast table, that is profound. So let's start at the foundation. What is actually happening to our bodies before we even open our eyes?
Well, to understand the solution, you have to understand the daily crisis your body is going through. Let's look at the physiology of sleep.
Okay.
Say you've had a standard 7 to 8 hours of rest. During that entire window, you haven't consumed a single calorie. Biologically speaking, you are in a prolonged fasting state.
Right, you're literally break fasting when you wake up.
Exactly. Now, while you're unconscious, your body is still incredibly busy. Your brain is consolidating memories, your immune system is repairing cellular damage.
Your heart is still pumping.
Pumping away, your diaphragm is pulling in oxygen,
Mm-hmm.
and all of that requires a massive amount of energy.
It's like the engine is still idling, right? And it's just burning through the fuel you gave it the night before.
That's a great way to put it. Specifically, it's burning through the glycogen stored in your liver. Glycogen is just stored carbohydrate. But by the time morning rolls around, that liver glycogen is largely depleted.
So the tank is basically empty.
Completely.
Mm.
Your blood glucose levels are at their absolute lowest point in the 24-hour cycle. When you wake up, your body desperately needs an immediate influx of energy to jumpstart your central nervous system.
And to get your organs functioning at a daytime capacity, right?
And this is where the modern morning routine just completely fails us.
Oh, totally. Because most people wake up, maybe they're rushing to get ready, maybe they don't feel particularly hungry.
So they just skip breakfast entirely.
Yeah, or they have like a cup of black coffee, which is a stimulant but gives you zero actual fuel.
Or maybe a piece of plain white toast, which is essentially devoid of any complex nutrients.
So what happens when we do that? When we don't give the body fuel?
Well, you leave your body in a highly precarious position. It needs fuel, but you haven't provided any. Since the body is highly adaptive, it switches to a backup generator.
Uh-oh, that doesn't sound good.
It enters what we call a catabolic state.
Mm.
Metabolism is simply the metabolic process of breaking down complex molecules into simpler ones to extract energy.
So it's breaking itself down.
Literally. If you don't give the body food, it begins to harvest its own tissues. It initiates this process of autocannibalization, breaking down your own muscle tissue to harvest amino acids.
Wait, I have to pause you there. Because I think a lot of people, myself included, are probably thinking, wait, if my body needs energy, why doesn't it just burn my body fat?
It's the most common question. We all have fat stores for exactly this reason.
Right. Why would the body choose to destroy perfectly good muscle tissue instead of just burning off the fat around the midsection?
It's a brilliant question, and it really comes down to the specific chemical demands of the brain and the speed of conversion.
Hmm.
Your brain runs almost exclusively on glucose.
Okay.
Yes. Now, while your body can convert stored fat into energy through a process called beta oxidation, that process is relatively slow, and it primarily fuels the muscles and organs, not the brain.
Ah, so it's a timing issue.
Exactly. To get the rapid glucose the brain is demanding right then in the morning, the liver utilizes a pathway called gluconeogenesis, which literally translates to the making of new glucose.
And it needs raw materials for that.
Yes, and the easiest raw materials for gluconeogenesis are amino acids. And where are the vast majority of your amino acids stored?
In your skeletal muscle. Wow. So, if I can use an analogy here, it's essentially like your body is a furnace keeping a house warm in the dead of winter.
Okay, I like this.
The furnace runs out of the firewood you gave it the night before, and instead of going out to the shed in the snow to slowly chop more wood, which would be the fat stores, the furnace just looks around the living room and decides it's much faster to start chopping up the floorboards.
That is a brilliant way to visualize it. It's exactly what's happening. And the body doesn't just randomly chop up any floorboards. It goes for the biggest ones.
Right. It goes for the thickest, most abundant wood available. In the human body, the largest reservoirs of skeletal muscle tissue are in the legs.
The quadriceps?
Hamstrings, the gluteal muscles, these are massive, dense structures. So the catabolic process targets the legs first.
That is terrifying. You're slowly dismantling the foundation of your house just to keep the lights on. And over time, I mean, if you keep chopping up those floorboards, eventually you're going to step on a weak spot and fall right through.
Which is precisely what happens to so many people as they age. In clinical terms, this progressive, age-accelerated loss of skeletal muscle mass and strength is called sarcopenia.
Sarcopenia?
Yes, and it's a compounding condition. The National Institute on Aging published data showing that adults over the age of 60 can lose up to 13% of their leg muscle mass in a single decade.
13% in just 10 years.
If they aren't actively intervening, yes. It's a staggering amount of tissue just vanishing. And the research indicates that this isn't just about, having thinner legs or not being able to lift a heavy box. Losing that much muscle sets off this terrifying domino effect throughout your entire physiological system.
It alters the entire metabolic landscape. You see, muscle tissue is highly metabolically active. It burns a significant amount of calories just by existing.
Right. It's expensive tissue to keep around.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when you lose that muscle mass, your basal metabolic rate plummets. You start burning fewer calories at rest, which almost invariably leads to an increase in visceral fat, that dangerous fat that wraps around your organs.
But the cardiovascular implications are even more severe, right? Because the legs aren't just for walking.
Not at all. They are a critical part of the circulatory system. They function as secondary hearts.
Wait, secondary hearts?
Think about it. The venous system in your legs has to pump blood against gravity all the way back up to your chest. To do this, the veins rely on the contraction of the surrounding leg muscles.
Oh, the calf muscle pump.
Yes. Every time you take a step, the muscle squeezes the vein, pushing the blood upward. When sarcopenia shrinks those muscles, the pumping action weakens.
So overall circulation declines.
Exactly. You get pooling of blood in the lower extremities, an increased risk of blood clots, and less oxygenated blood returning to the heart and the brain.
Which totally explains the chronic fatigue and even the cognitive fog that a lot of older adults experience. I mean, less oxygen to the brain means everything slows down.
And then there's the skeletal impact.
Right. We've talked before on the show about Wolff's Law, the biological principle that your bones will adapt to the loads under which they are placed.
Yes. If your muscles are strong and they're pulling hard against your bones respond by building more density.
But if the leg muscles are wasting away, that mechanical stress disappears.
Exactly. The signaling pathway that tells your osteoblasts to build new bone just goes completely silent. Bone density rapidly decreases, accelerating the onset of osteopenia and osteoporosis.
It really is a completely interconnected web of decline. And it's entirely triggered by the silent theft of muscle tissue during those unfueled morning hours.
And the most dangerous part of this silent theft is how it disguises itself in our daily lives.
Yeah, to ground this in reality, the research we looked at highlights this deeply relatable case study of a man named David.
David's story is so common.
Right. So David is 69 years old, and he's a retired construction engineer. This is a guy who spent his entire career on his feet. He was climbing up and down scaffolding, walking active job sites.
He had a lifetime of built-in physical resilience. He had a very high baseline of structural integrity.
But as he approached 70, his routine kind of caught up with him. The mornings became a serious struggle. He was waking up with profound stiffness in his knees.
And he described his feet as feeling heavy, almost numb, when he first stood up out of bed.
Yeah, his gait changed entirely. Those first few dozen steps every morning were slow, unsteady, and required intense concentration. He felt, I think his exact words were, like a machine whose gears had completely rusted over.
And the breaking point for David wasn't some catastrophic medical event. He didn't get into a car accident or suffer a stroke.
It was a completely mundane Tuesday morning. He walked out to his front porch to grab the newspaper, misjudged the height of this single step, and tripped.
He didn't even break a bone.
Right, but the psychological impact of that tiny stumble was devastating.
The psychological cascade of a fall, even a minor one, is deeply documented in geriatric medicine. It shatters the individual's confidence in their own spatial awareness and physical capability.
So what happens next?
What happens next is a subconscious adaptation. The person develops this profound fear of falling, which causes them to alter their biomechanics. They widen their stance, they take shorter, shuffling steps.
Right, they're trying to play it safe.
They are, but ironically, that shuffling, rigid gait actually drastically increases the probability of a secondary, much more severe fall.
Because they lose their agility.
Exactly. They lose the dynamic fluidity required to catch themselves if they do lose their balance. They also increase their double stance time, which is the amount of time both feet are touching the ground simultaneously during a stride.
David's wife actually noticed the decline immediately. He stopped taking his morning walks. He started using both hands to, violently push himself off the living room couch.
And his sleep was being destroyed by agonizing night cramps in his calves.
So he did what anyone would do. He went to his physician.
Naturally.
They ran the blood panels, they did the physical exams, and the diagnosis. Absolutely nothing.
Nothing at all. His A1C was normal, so no diabetes. His joints showed normal wear and tear, but no severe osteoarthritis, no neurological diseases.
The doctor essentially gave him a medical shrug. Like, David, you're just experiencing the after 60 phase. Take it easy.
And that medical shrug is the exact blind spot we were talking about today.
Yeah.
The allopathic medical model is designed to treat pathology, a clear disease state. Sarcopenia, especially in its early to moderate stages, doesn't look like a disease on a standard blood panel.
It just looks like the baseline expectation of aging.
Right. So the system simply tells the patient to accept it.
But David refused to accept it. He started looking aggressively into clinical nutrition, specifically how the body manages energy. And he realized his entire life, his morning routine, was just a cup of black coffee.
He was spending the first 4 hours of his day in a deep catabolic state,
actively cannibalizing the very leg muscles he needed to stay upright. So he overhauled his mornings. He completely stopped the empty stomach coffee routine
and began eating a very specific nutrient-dense profile of foods first thing in the morning.
The timeline of his turnaround is just incredible. Within 3 weeks, the chronic night cramps disappeared. The heavy, numb feeling in his feet lifted.
And by month 2, he was back to walking 2 kilometers every morning with zero assistance.
It's amazing.
And David's rapid neurological and muscular recovery aligns perfectly with some of the most compelling clinical data we have. Look at the landmark intervention studies coming out of institutions like Tufts University.
What did they find?
Their researchers demonstrated that seniors dealing with moderate mobility loss can recover up to 35% of their lower body strength in just 8 weeks.
35%?
Yes.
Yeah.
Simply by introducing targeted, highly nutritious morning protocols combined with basic movement.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second. Because a 35% strength recovery in 2 months, that sounds almost like pharmaceutical enhancement.
It does sound high, but it's accurate.
So is it truly the specific biochemical compounds in the food rebuilding the muscle, or is it just a matter of caloric energy? Meaning, if someone like David finally eats a heavy breakfast, he suddenly has the caloric energy to go for a walk, and it's the walking that builds the muscle, not the food itself.
It's a critical distinction to make. And while the physical movement is definitely necessary, the biochemical environment dictates whether that movement is helpful or harmful.
Interesting. How so?
If you try to exercise a muscle while your body is still in a catabolic fasting state, you are actually accelerating the damage.
Because it just breaks down more muscle for fuel.
Exactly. The body will just break down more muscle to fuel the workout. The specific proteins and complex carbohydrates we're talking about act as a hard physiological switch.
Okay.
When consumed early in the mornings, they flood the bloodstream with amino acids and instantly halt the catabolic destruction. They flip the body into an anabolic state. Anabolic meaning constructive or building up.
So you'd have to plug the hole in the bottom of the boat before you start trying to bail out the water.
That's a perfect analogy. The food plugs the hole. It stops the active destruction so that any movement you do throughout the day actually results in positive adaptation rather than further degradation.
That makes so much sense. So what exactly is the switch? What are the specific foods that have the power to halt this catabolic trap?
Well, the data points to a food that, for a very long time, was unfairly vilified in the diet world: the whole egg.
Ah, the incredible edible egg. The redemption of the whole egg in clinical nutrition really has been remarkable to watch.
It really has. For decades, the public was advised to consume egg white-only omelets out of this misguided fear that dietary cholesterol directly translated to serum blood cholesterol and heart disease.
Right. Everyone threw away the yolks.
We now know that the metabolic reality is far more complex. And by throwing away the yolk, people were discarding one of the most potent bioavailable nutrient matrices on the planet.
And when it comes to halting sarcopenia, the yolk is absolutely paramount.
It's where the magic happens. We're looking at a massive dose of vitamin D, vitamin B12, choline, and a very specific, highly critical amino acid called leucine.
Let's spend some time on leucine, because when you read the literature on skeletal muscle preservation, leucine is treated like the holy grail. What is it actually doing in our legs?
So leucine is an essential branch-chain amino acid. Essential meaning the body cannot synthesize it on its own. It must be obtained through your diet.
Okay.
But leucine isn't just a structural building block for muscle. It functions as a powerful signaling molecule. Deep inside your muscle cells, there is a specific protein complex called mTOR, which stands for the mechanistic target of rapamycin.
mTOR.
Yes, you can think of mTOR as the master control switch for cell growth and protein synthesis.
Okay, so if my leg muscle is a massive construction site, I might have a giant pile of bricks sitting there, which would be the other amino acids circulating in my blood.
Right.
But the workers are just sitting around drinking coffee. Nothing is getting built until the site foreman shows up, blows his whistle, and actively commands the workers to start laying the bricks. So leucine is the foreman.
That is an exceptionally accurate visualization of the intracellular mechanics. mTOR is the workers, and leucine is the foreman's whistle.
Wow.
When leucine enters the muscle cell, it binds to specific sensors that effectively release the brakes on the mTOR pathway. mTOR activates, and the cell immediately begins translating messenger RNA into brand new structural muscle proteins.
And without that foreman blowing the whistle.
Without a sufficient concentration of leucine, particularly in the morning, that mTOR pathway remains completely dormant. You could eat 100 grams of poor quality protein, but without the leucine trigger, the construction site stays closed.
And the whole egg is just an incredibly efficient delivery vehicle for it.
One of the best in the human diet.
But the yolk brings so much more to the table than just the foreman. You mentioned vitamin B12 earlier.
Yes.
How does a vitamin that we typically associate with just, general energy levels translate to physical leg strength and preventing falls?
It all comes down to neuromuscular communication. The brain has to send electrical signals down through the spinal cord and into the peripheral nerves of the legs to coordinate every single muscle fiber during a walk.
It's a complex operation.
Very. And those nerves are like electrical wires. They are encased in a protective layer of fat and protein called the myelin sheath. Think of it as the rubber insulation surrounding a copper wire.
Got it. And if the insulation frays, the electrical signal shorts out?
Precisely. As we age, oxidative stress and nutritional deficiencies can cause that myelin sheath to degrade. The electrical signals from the brain become slower, fragmented, or erratic.
Which manifests as that heavy, numb feeling David experienced, right? Or that slight lag in foe placement that causes a trip.
Exactly. And vitamin B12 is an absolute prerequisite for the body to synthesize and maintain that myelin sheath. By prioritizing B12-rich foods like egg yolks, you are literally repairing the electrical insulation of your nervous system.
Ensuring those signals fire cleanly and rapidly. And we also have the highly absorbable heme iron in the yolk.
Yes, which is crucial because older adults frequently suffer from subclinical anemia, which severely limits the oxygen-carrying capacity of their red blood cells.
So by boosting that iron, we're increasing the oxygen delivery directly into the capillary beds of the legs, clearing out cellular exhaust and preventing that rapid fatigue.
There is a fantastic piece of research from the University of Illinois that looks specifically at this intervention.
What did they do?
They took a cohort of seniors and simply added 2 whole eggs to their daily morning routine for 8 weeks. That's it.
And the results.
Highly significant, measurable improvements in lower body strength, chair stand performance, and overall physical autonomy.
Just from 2 eggs. It is a remarkably accessible, low-cost intervention, but the key, however, lies in the preparation and the timing.
It absolutely does.
Because if you're frying them in like an inch of highly processed vegetable oil every morning, you're introducing massive amounts of oxidized lipids and systemic inflammation, which completely counteracts the benefits.
Exactly. The integrity of the yolk's nutrients must be preserved. Boiling is widely considered the optimal preparation method because it surrounds the egg with an even moderate heat.
So it protects the delicate fats.
Yes, without introducing any exogenous oils. Soft boiled or poached is excellent. If you prefer them scrambled, utilizing a high-quality, low-heat cooking method is key.
And incorporating vegetables, right, like spinach or tomatoes.
Right, because that introduces exogenous magnesium and powerful antioxidants like lycopene, which further support vascular health.
And crucially, these need to be consumed within 1 hour of waking up.
The goal is to aggressively interrupt the overnight catabolic state.
Okay, so the egg is our rapid response unit. It blows the leucine whistle, activates the mTOR pathway, and gets the cellular construction workers moving.
Yes.
But building and repairing muscle is incredibly energy intensive. Those workers are going to need a sustained, steady supply of fuel. Otherwise, they're going to crash by, 10:30 in the morning.
Without a doubt. Which brings us to the second pillar of this protocol. The combination of whole rolled oats and chia seeds.
We have to address the energy consistency problem. Triggering muscle synthesis is only step 1. Fueling it over the course of hours is step 2.
Absolutely.
Now, I have to stop and address the massive dietary elephant in the room here.
I know exactly what you're going to say.
For the last 15 years, diet culture has aggressively pushed this low-carb, keto-centric narrative, especially for older adults trying to manage their weight or blood sugar. We are constantly told to avoid carbohydrates.
It's everywhere.
So aren't oats basically just a massive bowl of carbs? Won't eating a bowl of oatmeal cause a huge spike in an older adult's blood glucose, followed by a massive crash in lethargy?
Well, if we were discussing highly processed instant oatmeal packets that have been pulverized into dust and loaded with artificial maple syrup, then yes, your concern would be completely validated.
Because those refined starches hit the bloodstream almost as fast as pure sugar?
Precisely. But we are discussing intact, whole rolled oats. And the biochemical difference between the two is astronomical, primarily due to a specific class of soluble dietary fiber known as beta-glucan.
Beta-glucan. Walk us through exactly what this fiber is doing inside the digestive tract.
Beta-glucan has a unique rheological property.
Rheological. Meaning what?
Meaning it alters the flow and viscosity of liquids. When whole oats enter the acidic environment of your stomach and mix with water, the beta-glucan dissolves and forms an incredibly thick, highly viscous gel.
Really? Like a physical gel inside the stomach?
Yes. This gel coats the lining of the stomach and the upper intestine, fundamentally altering the kinetics of digestion. It physically traps the carbohydrates and slows down the action of digestive enzymes.
So instead of the digestive system easily ripping the carbohydrates apart and dumping all that glucose into the blood at once, it has to fight through this thick gel.
Precisely. It results in a drastically delayed gastric emptying rate. The glucose from the oats is released into the bloodstream in a slow, highly controlled, steady trickle over the course of several hours.
That is an absolute game changer for older adults whose pancreatic function and insulin sensitivity have naturally declined.
It really is. It completely blunts the postprandial glucose spike, that sharp rise in blood sugar you usually see after a meal.
It's like a biological time-release capsule for energy.
Exactly.
And by keeping the blood sugar completely stable, we avoid triggering a massive release of insulin, which in turn keeps systemic inflammation incredibly low.
Which is exactly what we want for muscle recovery.
But the protocol doesn't stop at just plain oats. The strategy here is to supercharge that bowl by stirring in a tablespoon of chia seeds.
Those kinase seeds are absolute nutritional powerhouses.
They really are. We're looking at dense concentrations of omega-3 fatty acids, calcium, potassium, and specifically magnesium.
And that specific mineral profile, particularly the interplay between calcium and magnesium, is the master regulator of muscle contraction.
Okay, let's look at the physiology of a muscle spasm or those agonizing night cramps that plagued David. What's happening there?
To execute a voluntary muscle contraction, your body floods the muscle fibers with calcium. The calcium binds to specific proteins, allowing the muscle filaments to slide together and tighten. That is the contraction phase.
But the muscle has to let go eventually, right?
Exactly. And to release that contraction, the muscle requires magnesium. Magnesium acts as a natural calcium channel blocker. It sweeps in, displaces the calcium, and allows the muscle fibers to disengage, relax, and lengthen,
So what happens if an older adult is deficient in dietary magnesium?
which a vast majority are. The calcium simply remains trapped in the muscle fibers. The muscle stays in a state of rigid, locked contraction.
That perfectly explains the profound morning stiffness. You literally don't have the chemical keys to unlock your own muscles.
That's a great way to say it. By infusing the slow-release oats with the magnesium-dense chia seeds, you are systematically delivering those chemical keys to your legs all morning long.
The standard clinical recommendation here is remarkably simple too. Roughly 3 tablespoons of whole rolled oats, cooked slowly until soft with 1 tablespoon of chia seeds stirred in.
Eaten warm, again, shortly after waking. The synergy of the stable glucose drip from the beta-glucan and the muscular relaxation triggered by the magnesium creates a highly optimal environment.
For the leg muscles to repair the micro tears accumulated from daily movement.
Exactly.
But, if we are diving into the world of minerals and neuromuscular function, we have to look at the undisputed king of dietary electrolytes, the most famous electrical conductor in the produce aisle, the banana.
The banana's reputation as nature's premier electrolyte delivery system is entirely supported by the biochemistry.
A standard medium banana contains approximately 400 milligrams of potassium, which is about 10% of the daily recommended intake.
But to understand why this matters for sarcopenia and mobility, we have to deeply examine the cellular membrane of your muscle tissue.
Right, because everyone has heard the locker room advice, oh, eat a banana if you get a Charlie horse.
Right.
But no one ever explains why. What is the potassium actually doing?
It governs the electrical gradient of your cells. Every cell in your body, particularly muscle and nerve cells, operates like a tiny biological battery.
Okay, a battery.
There is a difference in electrical charge between the inside of the cell and the outside environment. This is called the resting membrane potential. And this electrical charge is meticulously maintained by a protein pump in the cell membrane called the sodium-potassium pump.
Right, so it's constantly moving sodium out and bringing potassium in.
Exactly. It uses cellular energy to constantly pump 3 sodium ions out of the cell for every 2 potassium ions it brings in. This creates a highly sensitive, negatively charged environment inside the cell.
So what happens when you want to move your leg?
When your brain decides to move your leg, it fires an electrical signal and action potential down the nerve. When that signal reaches the muscle, voltage-gated channels fly open, sodium rushes in, the cell depolarizes, and the muscle contracts.
Okay.
But immediately after that, the potassium channels must open to let potassium rush out and reset the electrical balance.
So if your potassium levels drop too low, which happens naturally overnight just through basic respiration, minor sweating, and kidney filtration, that delicate electrical gradient destabilizes.
The battery fluid is completely compromised.
Mm.
The sodium-potassium pump can't reset the cell fast enough.
And what's the result of that?
When that electrical gradient is unstable, the muscle cell becomes hyperexcitable. The signals from the brain don't translate smoothly. The muscle fibers begin to misfire, twitching involuntarily.
Or worse?
Or worse, they spontaneously depolarize and violently lock up without any signal from the brain at all.
An excruciating leg cramp. It is a literal electrical short circuit happening inside your calf or hamstring. When you visualize it as an electrical failure rather than just a, quote, tight muscle, the importance of potassium becomes impossible to ignore.
There is fascinating epidemiological data from a massive Harvard University cohort study that tracked senior populations and their dietary habits.
Oh, what did they find?
They found that individuals who regularly consumed potassium-rich foods like bananas were 33% less likely to experience those debilitating lower extremity cramps.
A 1/3 reduction in severe muscular failure simply from maintaining the electrical integrity of the cellular membrane. That is huge.
And we shouldn't overlook the secondary benefits either.
Like what?
Bananas are exceptionally rich in vitamin B6, which is a required coenzyme for the synthesis of major neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin. So you are actively supporting both the peripheral hardware, the muscle cell gradient, and the central software, the brain's ability to communicate.
That's a great double benefit. However, there is a very necessary clinical caveat that we must address here.
Yes, absolutely.
The data makes it very clear that this is not a scenario where more is better, particularly for listeners managing specific metabolic or renal conditions. You cannot simply eat 4 bananas a day and expect superhuman legs.
Absolutely not. For individuals managing type 2 diabetes, the natural fructose and glucose in a fully ripe banana can present a glycemic challenge.
Right.
But more importantly, for anyone with chronic kidney disease or compromised renal function, excessive dietary potassium can be highly dangerous.
Because the kidneys are responsible for filtering it out, right?
Exactly. The kidneys filter excess potassium out of the blood. If they are failing, potassium can accumulate to toxic levels, hyperkalemia, which can cause severe cardiac arrhythmias. Anyone with renal concerns must strictly manage their electrolyte intake alongside their nephrologist.
But for those managing general blood sugar concerns, the research offers a brilliant biological workaround.
Yes, the ripeness of the banana changes its chemical structure entirely.
Which is fascinating. So the glycemic impact is dictated by the ripeness.
Precisely. As a banana ripens and the peel develops those brown spots, the complex starches break down into simple, free sugars. It becomes very sweet and digests very rapidly.
Not ideal for blood sugar.
But if you consume a slightly underripe banana one, where the peel is still firm and retains a hint of green at the stem flake, the nutritional profile is drastically different.
It's full of resistant starch.
Exactly. Resistant starch acts functionally like the beta-glucan in our oatmeal. It literally resists digestion in the stomach and small intestine.
So it doesn't break down into glucose, meaning it doesn't spike your blood sugar.
Right. Instead, it travels all the way to the large intestine where it acts as a prebiotic, feeding the beneficial bacteria in your microbiome.
And those bacteria ferment the resistant starch and produce short-chain fatty acids like butyrate, which profoundly lower systemic inflammation. So the protocol suggests eating that slightly green, underripe banana. And timing matters here too, doesn't it?
Yes, you don't want to eat it on a completely empty stomach first thing in the morning. Eat it after your eggs and oatmeal, allowing the protein and fiber from the previous foods to further blunt any residual glycemic response.
Okay, let's take stock of where we are. We have the rapid leucine trigger from the whole eggs blowing the whistle.
We have the sustained time-release energy from the oats.
And we have the electrical stability and cramp prevention from the banana.
But repairing the microtrauma in your legs takes hours.
Right. Your body needs a long, slow, continuous IV drip of amino acids to work with throughout the entire day. And that brings us to the next critical intervention, Greek yogurt.
This represents the shift from immediate morning triage to sustained all-day cellular maintenance.
Now, I have to ask the question everyone is thinking. Why specifically Greek yogurt? If I need protein and dairy, why can't I just drink a massive glass of whole milk or eat a bowl of standard run-of-the-mill yogurt? Isn't all dairy fundamentally the same when it comes to muscle?
It's a logical question. But the answer lies in the highly specific processing methods and the resulting protein architecture. Greek yogurt is profoundly different from standard yogurt because of how it is physically manufactured.
The straining process.
Yes. After the initial fermentation, Greek yogurt undergoes an extensive triple straining process. This mechanical straining removes a massive volume of the liquid whey and excess water. What is left behind is a dramatically denser, highly concentrated matrix.
You're condensing the nutrients. A standard 170-gram serving of authentic Greek yogurt can yield upwards of 17 to 20 grams of high-quality protein, which completely dwarfs standard yogurt.
But it's not just the amount of protein. It's the type of protein that survives the straining process. We're talking primarily about casein.
Right. Milk contains 2 primary proteins, whey and casein.
Whey is a fast-acting, highly soluble protein. It digests rapidly and floods the bloodstream with amino acids almost immediately. This is why bodybuilders drink whey protein shakes right after a heavy workout. They want rapid nutrient delivery.
But casein is different.
Completely different molecular structure. Casein proteins exist in large spherical formations called micelles.
And how do those micelles behave when they hit the human stomach?
This is where the magic happens. When micellar casein enters the highly acidic environment of your stomach, the low pH causes the protein structures to denature and essentially coagulate.
Coagulate.
Yes, the casein clumps together and forms a dense, physical gel, almost like a clot inside your stomach.
It builds its own roadblock.
Exactly. Because it forms this dense mass, the proteolytic digestive enzymes have a much harder time breaking it down. You have to slowly chip away at the outside of the clot.
And what's the pharmacokinetic result of that?
A slow, steady, sustained release of amino acids into the bloodstream that can last for up to 7 hours. It is the ultimate biological slow drip.
Oh, wow. So going back to our construction site analogy, if the egg is the foreman blowing the morning whistle,
Then the Greek yogurt is the heavy supply truck that slowly and continuously drops off new pallets of bricks all day long.
it ensures the cellular workers never have to stop building because they ran out of materials. And while the casein is doing that heavy lifting, the yogurt is also delivering massive amounts of bioavailable calcium for the skeletal system and an army of live probiotics.
Yes, and the inclusion of probiotics introduces a fascinating dynamic into the conversation about muscle health.
The gut-muscle axis.
The gut-muscle axis.
Yeah.
We hear about gut health constantly in relation to digestion or mood, but how on earth does the bacteria in my colon dictate the physical strength of my quadriceps?
The connection is profound, and it runs through the pathways of systemic inflammation and nutrient absorption. As we age, the integrity of the intestinal lining often degrades, and the diversity of the microbiome plummets.
Leading to leaky gut and things like that.
Exactly. This leads to a state of chronic, low-grade systemic inflammation, often referred to in gerontology as inflammaging.
Inflammaging.
When the body's constantly fighting this baseline inflammation, it triggers an immune response that restricts blood vessels and damages endothelial function. Oh, so the capillary beds in your extremities, like your legs, become constricted.
Blood flow is reduced, meaning the muscles are starved of oxygen and nutrients, regardless of how well you eat.
So, by aggressively repopulating the gut with the probiotics found in Greek yogurt, you are lowering the baseline inflammation. You are putting out the fire in the gut, which causes the blood vessels in the legs to dilate and open back up.
You're reopening the highways so the nutrients can actually reach the muscle tissue.
The clinical data supporting this is incredibly robust, too.
It is. An MRI university study conducted in the Netherlands followed older adults who simply consumed 20 grams of this type of protein every morning, paired with incredibly light, basic daily movement.
And within 6 weeks, the researchers recorded highly notable improvements in objective leg strength, vastly improved balance metrics, and a near total cessation of nocturnal leg cramps.
It is a complete systemic reset. However, the data strongly emphasizes that this intervention only works if you avoid the pitfalls of modern food manufacturing.
Right, you must strictly avoid flavored, highly processed Greek yogurts that are loaded with added sugars or artificial syrups.
Introducing high amounts of refined sugar will instantly spike blood glucose and trigger the exact inflammatory cascade we are utilizing the probiotics to prevent.
Plain, unsweetened Greek yogurt is the non-negotiable standard here. You can naturally flavor it yourself with a handful of antioxidant-rich berries or a dash of cinnamon, which also aids in blood sugar regulation.
And for those listeners who struggle with lactose intolerance or generalized dairy sensitivity, the research suggests seeking out Greek-style yogurts fermented from goat's milk or sheep's milk.
Because the fat globules and protein structures in goat and sheep milk are significantly smaller and far less likely to trigger digestive distress while still providing that crucial casein drip.
Exactly.
Now, we just touched on the concept of systemic inflammation and how it constricts the blood vessels and chokes off the legs. Greek yogurt helps fight that from the gut. But to truly eradicate that inflammatory block, we have to look slightly outside the typical Western breakfast paradigm. We have to look at an intervention that is incredibly common in places like Japan or Scandinavia, but might raise some eyebrows here.
Eating fatty fish for breakfast.
I know there are people listening right now recoiling at the idea of opening a tin of sardines at 7:30 in the morning.
It requires a massive cultural paradigm shift for many. In Western diets, fish is almost exclusively relegated to a dinner entree.
But when you dive into the lipid chemistry, the payoff is absolutely undeniable.
Introducing fatty cold water fish, such as wild-caught salmon, mackerel, or sardines into the morning routine, is one of the most powerful interventions available for musculoskeletal longevity.
We're talking about the heavy hitters of the lipid world, omega-3 fatty acids, specifically EPA and DHA. What makes these specific fats so vital for an aging set of legs?
Well, it comes down to cellular membrane fluidity and insulin sensitivity. We discussed how chronic inflammation damages the body. On a cellular level, a lifetime of consuming highly processed vegetable oils, saturated fats, and refined sugars causes the lipid bilayer, the outer membrane of your muscle cells, to become rigid, stiff, and inflamed.
The cell wall basically turns into a brick wall.
Exactly. And when that membrane becomes rigid, the receptor proteins embedded in it stop functioning correctly. The most critical of these is the insulin receptor.
Okay, because when you eat carbohydrates, your pancreas releases insulin.
And insulin's job is to bind to the receptor on the muscle cell and signal it to open up and absorb the glucose and amino acids from the blood.
But if the cell membrane is rigid and inflamed from poor dietary fats, the insulin receptor changes shape.
The insulin binds to it, but the signal fails. The door remains locked. This is the physiological root of insulin resistance.
It's like having the right key, but the internal mechanism of the lock is so rusted and jammed with debris that the key won't turn. Your muscles are starving for the protein and energy you just ate, but they can't absorb it. They are locked out.
EPA and DHA are the biological WD-40 for those rusted locks.
I love that analogy, WD-40 for your joints and tissues.
When you consume these long-chain omega-3s, they physically integrate into the cell membrane. They displace the rigid fats. They make the membrane flexible, fluid, and highly responsive again.
You spray that WD-40 into the lock, the inflammation subsides, the insulin receptor normalizes, the key turns smoothly, and the muscle cell finally absorbs the nutrients it needs to rebuild.
And the clinical outcomes of restoring that membrane fluidity are just phenomenal. A landmark longitudinal study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition tracked a large cohort of adults over the age of 65.
What was the setup?
They compared a control group eating a standard diet heavy in red meats to an intervention group that consumed 2 servings of fatty fish per week.
And the results?
The group consuming the fatty fish retained 27% more of their lower extremity skeletal muscle mass over the study period.
Retaining nearly 30% more of your leg muscle just by changing your protein source twice a week, that is the literal difference between walking independently through a grocery store and requiring a motorized scooter.
And unsurprisingly, that retention of muscle mass translated directly into a 36% lower incidence of falls.
Furthermore, fish provides a highly digestible matrix of protein. A standard 100-gram fillet of salmon delivers roughly 20 grams of complete protein, but it lacks the dense, tough connective tissues found in beef or pork,
Which makes it far less taxing on an older digestive system that may have lower levels of stomach acid.
The preparation guidelines suggest pan-searing fresh salmon in a high-quality extra virgin olive oil, which adds oleic acid, another powerful anti-inflammatory fat. But we do need to offer some practical guidance here.
Yes.
Digesting a heavy load of fats and proteins first thing in the morning can be challenging for seniors dealing with gallbladder issues or generally sluggish digestion.
Yes, individual tolerance is key. If you have fat digestion issues or are managing high cholesterol profiles, you must titrate this intervention.
Start small.
The clinical recommendation is to consume the fish early, on a largely empty stomach, before you eat your complex carbohydrates. This ensures that your concentrated gastric acid and bile salts can fully engage with the fish without being diluted by other foods.
And start with very small portions, perhaps just a few ounces of baked or gently steamed fish, rather than pan-searing in additional oil to keep the total lipid load manageable for your biliary system.
It's about finding the minimum effective dose that your body can comfortably process while still delivering those crucial omega-3s.
Okay, so fish for breakfast is a curveball, but the final dietary component on our list is perhaps the most counterintuitive of all.
It really is.
It involves a combination that sounds entirely like a Thanksgiving side dish, but it acts as a highly specialized neurological stabilizer for your balance. We are talking about steamed sweet potatoes heavily sprinkled with Celtic sea salt.
This specific combination is engineered to address 2 very distinct physiological needs that dictate morning mobility: hepatic glycogen replenishment and neuromuscular electrical signaling.
Let's start with the sweet potato. We already discussed the power of whole oats for providing complex carbohydrates. Why do we need another carbohydrate source? What makes the sweet potato uniquely qualified here?
Sweet potatoes possess a very specific starch profile that is exceptionally efficient at replenishing liver glycogen stores that were depleted overnight.
Okay.
Because of their high fiber content and specific cellular structure, they have a remarkably low glycemic index when boiled or steamed. They refill the body's energy tank without triggering the massive insulin spike that drives fat storage.
Additionally, they are dense in beta-carotene, a powerful antioxidant, and manganese, a trace mineral that is an absolute prerequisite for the synthesis of cartilage and the maintenance of joint health in the knees and hips.
So the sweet potato is a structural powerhouse.
But here is the massive screaming elephant in the room. The clinical protocol explicitly dictates sprinkling this sweet potato with salt. specifically natural Celtic sea salt.
Yes, it does.
We have to pause here. For the last 50 years, cardiologists and general practitioners have pounded the table, warning older adults that dietary salt is the absolute mortal enemy.
It's been the prevailing wisdom for decades.
We are told it skyrockets blood pressure, destroys the kidneys, and leads to heart attacks. Why on earth are we actively prescribing salt to a senior demographic?
This requires us to deeply unpack one of the most persistent misunderstandings in modern nutritional science: the catastrophic conflation of refined industrial chemicals with complex, naturally occurring mineral matrices.
Explain that.
When a physician warns you about the dangers of salt, they are referring to refined, industrialized table salt.
The stuff in the paper packets at a diner.
Yeah, exactly. Refined table salt undergoes an extreme manufacturing process. It is superheated, chemically bleached, and stripped of virtually every naturally occurring mineral until it is reduced to a stark, isolated chemical compound. 99.9% pure sodium chloride.
Wow.
Furthermore, manufacturers often add synthetic anti-caking agents, like sodium aluminosilicate, to prevent clumping.
So it's not really food anymore.
No, and when you ingest massive quantities of isolated pure sodium chloride, which is ubiquitous in processed Western foods, it rapidly enters the bloodstream. Because water follows sodium through osmosis, it pulls a massive volume of water directly into your blood vessels.
This dramatically increases your blood volume, which pushes violently against the vascular walls.
That is hypertension. That is the blood pressure spike.
Because it's an isolated, unbalanced chemical.
Precisely. But authentic Celtic sea salt, or any high-quality unrefined natural salt, is a fundamentally different substance. It is harvested through natural solar evaporation and undergoes zero chemical processing. Because it is unrefined, it retains a vast, highly complex matrix of over 80 naturally occurring trace minerals from the ocean.
80 trace minerals.
Yes. We are talking about highly bioavailable magnesium, calcium, potassium, zinc, and trace iodine, all bound together in a natural crystalline structure.
It's an entire symphony of minerals, not just a solo instrument.
That matrix changes how the body utilizes the substance. Because the sodium is naturally balanced by the magnesium and potassium, it doesn't just aggressively flood the vascular system.
Instead, those trace minerals act as keys, allowing the hydration to pass through the cell walls and actually hydrate the intracellular environment.
Furthermore, the peripheral nervous system absolutely relies on this broad spectrum of trace minerals to conduct the electrical signals required for proprioception.
Proprioception meaning your brain's awareness of where your feet are in space.
Yes. If you are deeply mineral deficient because you've been eating a strict low-salt diet, those electrical signals falter. You experience numbness, spatial disorientation, and a catastrophic loss of physical balance.
And the clinical data confirming this is absolutely mind-blowing. The French Institute of Mineral Nutrition conducted a rigorous 90-day trial involving older adults.
They had the intervention group consume high-fiber, complex carbohydrate breakfasts mirroring our sweet potato, and instructed them to actively incorporate unrefined, mineral-rich salt into their morning routine.
The results were staggering. At the end of the 90 days, that group demonstrated a 41% improvement in objective balance testing.
And that 41% improvement in balance directly correlated to nearly a 50% reduction in total recorded falls compared to the control group.
Half as many falls.
No.
Not from a new drug, not from a walker, but simply by providing the nervous system with the raw electrical conductors it needed to communicate with the legs.
The protocol suggests steaming half of a sweet potato, sprinkling it with a small pinch of the Celtic salt, and eating it roughly 10 minutes before your main breakfast, ideally alongside a glass of warm water.
It acts as a biological primer. You are deeply hydrating the cellular tissue and preloading the electrical system before the heavy influx of protein and complex calories arrives.
Which is the absolute perfect transition to the final and arguably most crucial piece of this entire deep dive.
Right, because optimizing the nutritional fuel is 90% of the battle. But if you don't physically boot up your biological hardware correctly in those first few minutes of consciousness, those nutrients will never reach their target. We have to analyze the physical morning routine, the 5-step boot-up sequence.
Nutrition is entirely dependent on circulation. You can consume the most bioavailable leucine, the highest quality omega-3s, and the perfect trace minerals. But if your cardiovascular system is sluggish, your blood vessels are constricted, and your nervous system is dormant,
those nutrients will simply circulate in the core and be filtered out by the liver and kidneys. They will never reach the distal capillary beds deep inside the quadriceps and calves.
This sequence is about forcefully opening the delivery pathways.
I look at this exactly like a pre-flight checklist for a commercial pilot.
Okay, I like this.
You would never walk out to a jet that has been sitting on a freezing tarmac all night, instantly jam the throttles to maximum power, and try to take off. The engines would stall, the hydraulics would fail, and you'd crash.
You have to systematically turn on the avionics, warm up the engines, check the fluid pressures, and prime the system for flight.
Our bodies demand the exact same respect. So let's walk through the pre-flight checklist for the human body. Step 1. Drink a glass of warm water with a tiny pinch of natural salt immediately upon waking.
We just established the neurological necessity of those trace minerals. By dissolving a tiny pinch in warm water, you create an isotonic solution that is instantly absorbed through the gastric lining.
Immediately replacing the fluids and electrolytes lost through 8 hours of respiration and perspiration. And the temperature of the water is equally vital, right?
Cold water shocks the vagus nerve and causes the stomach blood vessels to constrict. Warm water gently dilates the vasculature of the gastrointestinal tract, stimulating early blood flow and signaling the parasympathetic nervous system that the fasting period is ending.
It's turning on the internal power grid. Step 2 is where the physical work begins. 3 minutes of dedicated leg lifts and balance calibration while still lying down or sitting on the edge of the bed. Lift 1 foot 2 to 4 inches off the mattress, hold it in the air for 10 seconds, lower it, and switch.
To be clear, this is not a hypertrophy exercise. You are not trying to tear muscle fibers or build mass with a 2-inch lift. This is entirely about neuromuscular activation.
You are waking up the motor units.
By forcing the brain to isolate and contract the stabilizing muscles in the calves, the hip flexors, and the thighs against gravity for 10 seconds, you are testing the electrical pathways.
You are calibrating the proprioceptive sensors in your joints before you demand those joints to support your entire body weight dynamically across the room.
You are pinging the server to make sure it's online.
Right. Hey, legs, we're going to be carrying 170 pounds in a minute. Are we ready?
Yeah.
Step 3 is deeply tied to cardiovascular physics. Do not rush out of bed. Take 3 deep diaphragmatic breaths, sit up on the edge of the bed very slowly, and consciously rotate your wrists and your ankles for 30 seconds.
This step specifically mitigates one of the most common precursors to geriatric trauma: orthostatic hypotension.
Orthostatic hypotension.
When you are lying flat for 8 hours, your heart doesn't have to work very hard to pump blood to your brain because it's not fighting gravity. When you suddenly stand up, gravity pulls a massive volume of blood down into your legs and abdomen.
The blood pressure in your head suddenly drops.
Exactly. In a younger person, pressure sensors in the neck, called baroreceptors, instantly detect this drop and trigger a rapid sympathetic reflex, constricting the blood vessels in the legs to push the blood back up to the brain.
But as we age, the sensitivity of those baroreceptors blunts. The reflex is delayed.
If you stand up too fast, the blood pools in your legs, your brain is momentarily starved of oxygen, you experience profound dizziness or lightheadedness, and you collapse.
But by sitting up slowly, breathing deeply, and rotating the extremities, you give the baroreceptors time to register the change in posture. You manually engage the calf muscle pump to start pushing blood upward, completely neutralizing the risk of that syncopal fall.
It takes maybe 45 seconds, but it could literally save you from a shattered hip.
Step 4 takes us out of the bedroom and into the environment. Expose your eyes and skin to 5 minutes of direct morning sunlight.
We all recognize sunlight's role in synthesizing vitamin D, which is non-negotiable for the absorption of calcium in the gut to maintain the density of the ankle and hip bones.
But the more immediate neurological impact happens through the eyes.
Yes. When early morning sunlight, specifically the blue light wavelengths present at dawn, hits the specialized melanopsin receptors in your retina, it sends a high-priority signal directly to the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the brain.
The master clock.
Yes. This light exposure violently halts the production of melatonin, the sleep hormone, and triggers the cortisol awakening response. It floods the brain with the precise neurochemicals required for sharp spatial awareness, rapid reaction times, and coordinated motor control.
You cannot achieve optimal physical balance if your brain is still chemically swimming in melatonin.
You have to literally turn the lights on in the brain.
And finally, step 5, the culmination of the entire biological intervention we have discussed today. Do not delay breakfast.
Prolonging the morning fast is the single most destructive habit for aging skeletal muscle.
Every hour you delay nutrient intake is an hour. Your liver is forced to sustain the brain by scavenging amino acids from your quadriceps and hamstrings.
The catabolic state does not care about your schedule.
If you or simply cannot stomach a massive plate of eggs, oats, and fish at 7 in the morning, you must still intervene. Eating even a fractional portion, half of a steamed sweet potato, a single soft-boiled egg, or half a green banana is chemically sufficient to flip the MTR switch.
It halts the autocannibalization and signals the body to transition from destruction to preservation.
The power is entirely in your hands. And honestly, that brings us to the ultimate overarching realization of this entire deep dive.
We have been spoon-fed a narrative of helplessness. We are told over and over that aging legs, the shuffling steps, the loss of independence, that it is a one-way slide down a hill.
But the clinical biochemistry, the trials from Tufts, from Harvard, from the French Institute, they are all pointing to a radically different reality. Much of this decline is not an unchangeable law of physics. It is the direct consequence of prolonged morning catabolism.
It is a profound, decades-long nutritional deficiency masquerading as chronological aging.
The human organism is astonishingly resilient, even well into our 70s, 80s, and beyond. The cellular machinery for repair, the MTO pathways, the insulin receptors, the sodium-potassium pumps, they do not disappear.
But they absolutely require the correct biological raw materials to execute that maintenance.
And it can be stopped, it can be reversed, by strategically deploying leucine-rich eggs, beta-glucan from oats, the electrical stability of bananas and Celtic salt, the slow casein drip of Greek yogurt, the anti-inflammatory WD-40 of fatty fish, and executing a deliberate, respectful 5-minute boot-up routine, you are actively building a physiological shield around your physical independence.
For you listening, this changes the entire calculus of aging.
Your ability to walk, to hike, to stand up from a chair without wincing, it isn't just a matter of genetic luck or rolling the dice. It is deeply, inextricably tied to the very first choices you make when your feet hit the floor every single morning.
You have the ultimate authority to feed the floorboards, rather than blindly letting the furnace burn your house down.
You are stepping out of the passenger seat and taking direct control over the trajectory of your own physical autonomy.
Which leaves us with a truly provocative, almost unsettling thought to mull over.
Yeah, if we, as a society and a medical establishment, have so completely misunderstood the inevitable aging process of our leg muscles, if something as profound and terrifying as losing the ability to walk can actually be halted and reversed by understanding the biochemistry of a boiled egg, some whole oats, and a pinch of salt.
What other so-called unavoidable signs of aging in our bodies are actually just hidden chronic nutritional gaps, just waiting to be properly filled?
It demands that we rigorously question every single limitation we've been told to accept as normal.
It really does. The narrative of aging is being rewritten at the cellular level.
So the next time you wake up and feel a little stiffness in your knees or a little heaviness in your steps, remember, the medical diagnostic landscape might be murky, but the solution on your breakfast plate is crystal clear. Keep asking questions, keep feeding the floorboards. Until next time.